Welcome back to the Lawyer Diaries. Today, we are giving you some tips on how to lateral discreetly.
We see a lot of candidates who would benefit from, well, pretty much every candidate benefits from laterally discreetly, but one particular type of candidate benefits. Several of our candidates are happy with the firm they're at, but they're interested in exploring other opportunities because maybe there's a firm that they've had their eye on that does the type of work they're really interested in, and they want to see if they can get an offer there. Or maybe they're just trying to explore what the market looks like. Those types of candidates, they they don't necessarily want their current firm to know that they are actively looking elsewhere because maybe they don't get any offers, or maybe the firms that they're interested in are not actually what they had imagined and they would be happier staying at their current firm. You don't want your current firm to know that you've been looking at other firms and that you've gone through the lateral process and interviewed elsewhere, because you don't want them to think that you have one foot out the door when you don't.
Absolutely. And on the other hand, let's say you're absolutely miserable. You can't wait to leave your firm. You should still lateral discreetly. Don't throw all caution to the wind because until you have an offer, you don't have an out, and you don't want to give them any reason to push you out prematurely or stop giving you work. It's still a job that you need to maintain, and you should, to the extent possible, continue to do the work well and show up every day. Um, and you don't want to be on their timeline. So again, it's important to be cautious and use discretion when you are exploring your options. And finally, I mean, this goes without saying, you also want to leave a good impression, and it doesn't leave a good impression to, kind of signal to the firm that you don't care what they think and you're more interested in working elsewhere.
Exactly. And I know that lawyers hear this a lot, but it's a small community, it's a small world out there. So you never know if a partner that you work with at your current firm is going to be a referral in the future, even if you're not loving your time there and you want to leave as soon as possible. So be discreet because it's the polite thing to do, and it can protect you from getting pushed out prematurely.
Exactly. So, our first piece of advice to that end is don't use your personal email or phone for anything lateral related. So, when you're responding to a recruiter email or you're applying to a job, use your personal email. This can be your school email or just like any old Gmail that you have, so long as it has a professional username, and your personal cell phone number. Again, this might seem obvious, but sometimes people will respond to a recruiter outreach email from their work email. That's fine, but the better that you can take it off of the firm network, it's better to take it off the firm network.
Exactly. And like Becca said, make sure that your personal email is work appropriate because your resume is going to have that email. So make sure it's something that you would want a future employer to read and not raise any red flags. Number two, don't save anything related to your lateral search on your work computer. So that means resumes, cover letters, etc. I know that this sounds obvious, but it can be so tempting when you get a 10-minute break in the middle of the day to pull out your resume and start editing it during that 10-minute break on your work computer. Try not to do this because to the extent possible, you should be doing everything related to lateraling on your personal computer and on your personal network.
Yeah, exactly. This might sound, I don't know, overcautious, but at the end of the day, your work laptop is property of your law firm. So you shouldn't keep anything personal on it. And I actually had a friend who had his resume on his desktop, and a partner saw it because she was like looking at something on his computer and then asked him about it. And He was able to explain it away, I guess, because then nothing came of it. I knew he was interviewing at other places, but ultimately he stayed at the firm. So it exposes you to, the risk of questions and people thinking maybe, you do have one foot out the door. So it does happen. So think twice before you open a resume or cover letter or anything on your work computer.
That is such a good point. And I think that this becomes even more important when work is slow, because if a partner sees your resume pulled out, they're immediately going to think, why are you editing your resume? Why are you working on your resume? You shouldn't have opened a resume since you stepped foot in this office and accepted an offer to work for us. I'm nervous now that you're going to leave. So when work is scarce, they may not think of you when assigning work. So you want to make sure that there's just no trace of your lateral search on your work computer, because accidents can happen and it's better to be safe than sorry.
Totally. On the same vein, you should, to the extent possible, take all communications relating to your search. So, calls with your recruiter or virtual screeners that you have at home or at the least outside of the office. You might be safe closing the door of your office. Why not just be extra careful and make sure that, you know, no one can hear you, no one can see anything. Again, it might sound a little extra, but you really should be reserving all of this for home because it isn't work.
Exactly. And if you're in the office taking an interview, you never know when someone's going to knock on your door and barge in with a question. And now you've made a bad impression with your interviewer as well. So, and also, it just really, I mean, the chances of someone overhearing something or noticing that you're in an interview are really, really high, especially with our candidates who we always recommend wear a suit and tie for your interviews. And more likely than not, you're not wearing that attire in your day to day job at the law firm. So the risk is just so high when you take calls with your recruiter or with a prospective firm in the office where someone can overhear you. Do all of that, go out, take a walk, and then take that call, or go home and take that call.
Totally. I didn't even think of that. Like if you showed up to the office in a suit or something and you never wear a suit, not a good look.
Not a good look. People are going to be like, oh, I didn't know that you were taking a deposition today. And you're going to be like, I'm not. So it's going to raise some eyebrows. Number 4, go into the office on days you're not interviewing. This one is really important, especially now that we're in the post COVID era and firms are asking all of their attorneys to go back into the office anywhere between 2 to 5 days a week. A lot of firms have started some sort of software that tracks how many days you are in the office, and it's important to them. So if prior to interviewing you were in the office an average of 3 days a week, and then suddenly when you start interviewing you're in the office once a week, that might raise a few red flags and people might get concerned or confused. They might get suspicious, like, what is he doing? What's going on? So go into the office as often as you can on the days that you can and you don't have an interview scheduled, because we know it's really hard to go to the office if you have a remote interview scheduled from 11 to 1 p.m. in the middle of the day. And even if you're showing up at the office on a Monday or Friday when no one else is in, the system is still going to catch that you logged into the office that day. And it's going to still add a day to your average and it will be less suspicious.
Totally. So let's just say, you might have a full day of interviews in person. That's going to be at least 2 hours plus your commute time. You can kind of make up for it by going in an extra day of the week that you may not have otherwise gone. And again, this just serves to increase visibility, keep goodwill. You're still showing up, you're still talking to people, they can still see you around. It can be incredibly stressful to be taking the whole day off for an interview. I mean, you're constantly bombarded with emails and work, and then you have to kind of turn your phone off and not go into the office and not talk to people for a day. That can be extremely stress inducing, and we think going into the office as much as you can on those days that you're not interviewing will, to a certain degree, help make up for that.
And we know that this is easier said than done, especially if you are one of those candidates who is excited to leave and you're ready to
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah.
Like you're probably, if you do have one foot out the door, you're probably thinking, I don't want to show up and I want to do as little as possible. But we really recommend you show up on the days you're not interviewing because it will just improve your relationship with your current partners and associates, because until you have an offer from another firm, there is no guarantee that you are going to have a place to go to. That you might be stuck at this firm for longer than you expected. So you want to make sure that you are performing as well as you possibly can be, which is so, so tough if you are ready to leave.
Absolutely. Our last tip is to, if you decide to work with a recruiter, find a recruiter who does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So, what does this mean? A recruiter obviously drafts your cover letter and handles your submission. Even better if you can find someone who will help tweak your resume so you don't have to spend all that extra time, revising it and making sure it's up to par for this search. But to the extent your recruiter can also help prep you for interviews, this can be crucial. Something we do with all of our candidates is provide a cheat sheet that gives information on the firm background, on the practice area, and on all of the different people that you're going to be interviewing with. And this just saves you time because then you don't have to do it yourself, and you should be doing it before every interview. Additionally, we also do interview prep, which just, whether it's 30 minutes to an hour that you have, we will just force you to run through some of these most asked questions, which again, if we're not doing it with you, you should be doing it by yourself. So a recruiter can help a lot and ultimately can save you a lot of time besides just the, obvious scheduling and coordinating with the firm recruiter. Another thing to consider is your recruiter's availability. Are they extremely responsive? We both worked in big law. We know how demanding the hours are. And sometimes you don't have a moment to breathe until Friday night or even Sunday night or maybe super early Monday morning. And because we understand that, we are super responsive for our candidates regardless of the day or time of the week. So that's another thing to consider when you are deciding what recruiter to use or to use a recruiter at all.
Exactly. I think that it is so important if you do decide to use a recruiter to use someone who really understands what your day to day looks like, because as big law attorneys, you don't work a 9 to 5. You might have a closing, a last minute closing at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday, and you may have to reschedule something last minute. And you want to have a recruiter, if you text them at midnight on Sunday, they're going to respond and they understand the urgency of this. That is so, so important. And also, a good recruiter can save you so much time. And I don't think that folks will understand how much time a good recruiter will save you until they try to do a search on their own or until they've done a search with a not as great recruiter. So I think people who have used a good recruiter and who have used a not as great recruiter, they will definitely tell you, wow, I was way less stressed with my good recruiter. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything and that the process is going to be extreme. Well, the process will be much smoother, but you're still going to have to put in the work because a recruiter can't physically do an interview for you, but a good recruiter can do all of the work that you can't do for you, meaning putting together those cheat sheets, making sure your resume is an A+ product, and being there for you if anything pops up last minute.
And pushing your candidacy along so that you don't have to think about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's all we have for today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or DM us. We are always happy to chat. Till next time.
Bye.